Welcome to Monday Night Live, the weekly training that guides professionals to financial prosperity. Join our community and let's start building your wealth.
So everybody wants you to meet Frank Rode. Frank, I met through doing a podcast, and we hit it off right away. The guy's an awesome citizen, and Frank, we use that word a lot when we're describing good people, good hearts and good minds, and he's got a great subject, guys. I think you're gonna really enjoy tonight. So be ready to take notes and ask questions. And if you're register for class, which you are, if you're here, you'll get the recording the next day from Beverly or Sugar actually, and you can re-listen to parts if you want. So Frank, first off, welcome aboard, man. I appreciate you doing this.
Thank you, Gary, and thanks for having me.
I'm glad to do it. If you wouldn't mind, I know you probably got some sort of a presentation. It's okay, even if it's just dialogue with Q&A. But before you do, would you mind giving people a little bit of background first?
Sure. So hey, everyone, thanks for having me. I'm in San Francisco and have lived here for the better part of 25, almost 30 years. But originally from Germany, came to the US, studied here, spent a number of years in consulting, financial services, worked at FICO, Fair Isaac in the credit scoring business, and then eventually started a software company that built the pricing engine for a lot of the large mortgage lenders in the US, Canada, and abroad. And so spent the last 15 years until about 2 years ago in the bowels of mortgage math, really, understanding that product and then helping the lenders understand how to price it, how to position it, how to sell it. And then sold that company, and about 2 years ago started a new company called Ownify, really to help first-time home buyers, because that is the big mission that, or the big problem that I saw with a lot of the lenders, a lot of the data. I think everyone kind of understands it anecdotally. And so we've been spending the last 2 years or so building really an alternative path for first-time buyers. And so the value prop that I'd love to talk about is, how do you help home buyers, and how do you enable investment into single-family owner-occupied real estate on the other side of the equation as well. And yeah, happy to dive in, but Gary, I'm taking your lead here, so let me know.
Yeah. Well, first off, I wonder how many people, a quick little quiz here, how many people picked on something that helps you recognize why Frank and I hit it off so well the first time we spoke? Go ahead, Eric.
Sorry. Well, I'm assuming there's possibly a little creative financing involved in this. So,
Yep.
Yeah. Well,
kind of like that
part,
topic. So,
yeah, that's good. You're close. It's actually he's German. Of course, some of you remember I was born in Germany and just spent 12 days there with my dad, brother, and sister back right before Christmas. So as soon as he started talking, I realized it doesn't that's not a typical California accent. Sounds familiar, So, well, Frank, go ahead and let's paint a picture for everyone. You did, so far the introduction. Like to me, what resonates with me is I started in this business in January 1986, and for those of you who remember, there was a major push starting in the 70s for home ownership across the country, well into the 90s. But if you think about it, in the last generation, how much dialogue have you heard coming from, you know, Washington, D.C. or state legislatures promoting home ownership? Almost zero. It's like it's just become a thing of the past. And I just think it's a shame. I think where there's a will, there's a way. And people in America sometimes come to America because they feel like this is the place they can actually buy a home, you know? So, having said that, there are ways for people to participate in home ownership. You just have to be a little bit creative. So Frank, does that help kind of paint a
Yeah.
little bit of a picture there? Yeah.
Yeah. Let me kind of riff on that a little bit. It's interesting, having come from Germany. In Germany, the home ownership rate is a little over 50%, right? Significantly below the 64, 65, 66% we've always had in the US. And that's because the US has always had, deeply as part of the American dream, ownership, land and home ownership as part of the journey. And the government has supported it for a long time, still supports it, right? Through, in particular, the mortgage and the fact that, you can basically get a 30-year fixed rate mortgage in the US, which you can't get in most countries, right? The fact that the government supports or offloads the interest rate risk from the consumer is great. However, if you look at where we are today compared to, Gary, when you started, or most of recent history, it has gotten much, much harder for homeowners, first-time buyers in particular, to make that leap, right? And a big part of this, I think everyone kind of hears anecdotally, but I wanted to just take a super quick minute to, understand why that is. And one is obviously because, home prices continue to go up and have been going up pretty consistently over the last 50 years or so, to the point where it's now more expensive to own a home in the US than it has ever been in recorded history. So one is, home affordability or home prices themselves as or relative to incomes. Second one is mortgage rates have now reverted to what are arguably long-run averages, right? And most people, especially realtors, if you talk to them, say, oh, mortgage rates are so high. Well, they're not really. They're in the 6s and 7s, right? The average over the last 50 years is 5.5. So we're not that far off from where they should be and where they have been and where they probably will kind of settle, over the next couple of years. The era of 2.5 or 3% mortgage rates is probably gone. We also, and this is relatively new, if you look over the last 15 years or so, we have significant student debt. So in particular, first-time buyers in their 20s and 30s, right? They come out of college and they have $40,000, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 of student debt, and they're paying that off over a long period of time. So the ability to save for a down payment or stack a mortgage payment on top of a student loan payment has gone down, and people are getting squeezed. And then more recently, you've had investors come into the market, right? Whether those are mom and pops or individuals, or Wall Street, Blackstone, BlackRock, you name your favorite SFR operator, buying up single family homes in a lot of communities. And so all of that coming together basically makes it harder today to buy a home for a first time buyer in particular than it has ever been. And this is a problem that's highly regressive in the sense that someone who has family wealth, who has parents who can help, doesn't really see this problem, right? Or has a way to overcome this problem. But folks who don't have that backdrop of generational wealth or the ability to have someone in their family help are struggling in particular. And so then you look at home ownership rates, we're kind of stuck, and we're stuck in an environment where recent immigrants or minorities in particular are being disadvantaged here. So what we were trying to figure out with Ownify is how do we help? How do we build a solution to this problem here? And how do we potentially activate capital to lean into this? Because whenever you have a big problem, there's also an opportunity here somewhere, right? If you can figure out how to create a solution that leans into this and invests into this. And so what we've done is we've looked at this, kind of with a long range lens to say there are about 1 million people or so per year coming into the market that are not going to be able to buy houses every year for the next 10 years. So Gen Z, millennials. And that's a market opportunity that's large enough to warrant investment. And with Ownify, what we've built is basically a co-investment offering or a partnership between investors and first-time buyers that is not a mortgage, but really an equity partnership around helping people purchase homes. And what that means is that there's a two-sided value proposition here that you can take into different markets. We launched this in North Carolina, Raleigh-Durham. We're now looking to take this to other markets. And the way the two-sided value prop works is that on the one side, you have the first-time buyer. So folks like who you see on the screen here, Zach and Skylar, right, who are young home buyers. They bought a $350,000 home, and they were able to do that with 2% down as a very low entry point. We gave them a cash offer that allowed them to compete in the market and actually win the home. They had 7 competitive offers. We were able to buy it for them with that cash offer. And they're now living in that house, have been for about 1.5 years. And what they're doing is they're making a fixed payment. So they have a fixed payment for 5 years, and they're buying bricks in this home. Bricks are equity interests or effectively shares in the entity that holds title to the home. And what that allows them to do is build equity over time in that property, not as debt. So there's no obligation to ever pay off a mortgage. There's no interest payment, but as equity in effectively a dollar cost averaging journey over 5 years, where they start with 2% and they end up with 10% at the end of 5 years. Now, what is a brick? A brick is basically a representation of 1 basis point of the value of the home. So each home that we finance and that we fractionalize, we break into 10,000 bricks, and we value each of those bricks on day one as 1 basis point of the value of the home. So in this case, $350,000 home, the bricks are worth $35 each, and then we allow the customer to buy those bricks over time at the current value of the home, which means, as that $350,000 home increases to $360 or $370, the value of a brick goes up to $36 and $37. But if it decreases to $340,000 or $330,000, the value of a brick also falls to $34 and $33. And so if you think that through, really what that means is that the customer is buying equity in the home, just like you're buying equity in a mutual fund, or any other sort of equity investment. And it protects against downside in the sense that the customer can never be underwater. They can lose their down payment, or that their down payment can't be underwater. But it also creates upside for the investor pool that partners with these first-time buyers. So that's the investor value prop, if you will. And then on the other side, we are sourcing investors, and these are today accredited investors. So folks largely in the same community, who are funding the balance of the purchase price through an investment in a fund, the Ownify Home Fund, that buys and holds the bricks while the customer, Zach and Skylar in that example, haven't bought them. And so as an investor, you're effectively holding the other 9,800 bricks on day one, and you're selling them progressively to the customer over that 5-year horizon. While you're holding them and while the customer hasn't bought them, we charge the customer rent on those bricks. So really what we've structured here is not a debt product, but an equity share or fractional ownership structure where the customer builds their stack of bricks, if you will. And as soon as they have those bricks, as soon as they own them, they don't have to pay rent on them. And while they're building that stack, they're renting, the majority of the bricks or the equity in the home that they haven't purchased. And so legally, we've built what is effectively fractional ownership and fractional rental relationship between a customer and accredited investors in each of these single family homes. So let me pause there and see whether that makes sense.
There was a question. I think it was, let me check the Q&A box. Well, I thought PF had a question.
Gary.
Yep. Is that Panetta?
Hi, Frank. It kind of sounds like what the Sharia loans. Are you familiar with the?
Yeah.
The Sharia.
It's a great question.
They buy. Well, that wasn't really a question, but the concept of this kind of sounds exactly like what they do. They partner with the person, and the person's buying a little bit of the house every time they pay the rent, and then they get a larger portion or a larger ownership piece of the property as they continue to pay the monies that they borrowed down.
That is correct. And so I was not familiar with Sharia loans or halal financing. As we built this, bumping into a number of investors as well as home buyers, a number of folks have pointed out that this is in fact a halal or Sharia compliant financing solution, similar to the ones that are out there. As I dug into this, and then I've actually talked with a couple of Islamic scholars about this, we do seem to be fully compliant with this, right? And this is definitely an opportunity that we're evaluating to see are there opportunities to source both Muslim investors as well as Muslim home buyers into this product, right? Not necessarily branding it as such, but being aware of the fact that this is, because it doesn't have an interest component, actually Sharia compliant.
Right.
So,
Awesome.
so where this really gets interesting is in that it changes, this structure actually changes the consumer behavior. And this was, kind of a thesis we had early on, in that what we're doing is we're combining elements of ownership, traditionally done through a mortgage, and ownership and components of renting. And what we're trying to do is kind of combine the best of both worlds, right? So give the customer equity ownership as represented through these shares in the entity that holds title to the home. We're trying to give them payment certainty, which is one of the biggest complaints about renting, right? Especially as we go through higher inflation. We're trying to give the customer, or gave the customer, the ability to renovate and remodel, but then also the low upfront commitment, right, that you normally don't get with a mortgage, and the protection of covering repairs, insurance, property taxes, right? So the protection against downside for a first-time buyer. And so what ended up happening, let me fast forward here a little bit, is that the customers are benefiting in the sense that they're saving on the down payment, they're building equity actually faster than with a mortgage. Today they're saving relative to the mortgage payment because interest rates are high, and our monthly payments are actually lower. And then importantly, they're winning, right? Their offers are actually competitive in the market. And I think this is, as realtors in particular, one of the biggest drawbacks that an FHA mortgage or a low down payment loan, right, or down payment assistance program has in the market, that a lot of times sellers look at it and go, that I'd much rather sell to an all cash offer because it's just safer. I'll take the money, right? And that squeezes out first time buyers in particular. So there's a bunch of benefits here for the first time buyer. And then what we found on the investor side, let me switch over to kind of the fund overview here, is that there are a number of benefits that accrue to the investor, and in particular, they accrue because of the co-ownership behavior. And so the first thing we've seen is that the customers that we've been able to attract into the program have really good credit scores. So these are not credit impaired consumers. Average FICO in the portfolio is 740. So far, we've had 0 late pays. We've had not a single day of vacancy. And we've had significantly lower maintenance and repair costs because the people who are living in these houses are acting as co-owners, right, rather than as a tenant. So you're creating this co-ownership mentality that really ultimately benefits the investor. And so what all of that ultimately results in is that as an investor value prop, what we can put out there is, significant equity appreciation over time, a healthy cap rate, so passive income going back to these investors, for a return that, we're targeting 15%, we're a little over 16% thus far on an annualized basis. And so we can combine, market rate investor returns with social impact that we're having in allowing first-time buyers, and in particular, kind of the missing middle, as we call them, first-time buyers, to get into houses. So that's the super quick version of what we've built, and obviously would love feedback. Understand how this could help you in your markets. Any questions you might have, and take it from there.
Mail.
So how long have you been in business? I'm sorry, I know you mentioned it, but I think I missed that. I think it was a little.
Yeah, we started a little over 2 years ago. The first couple of homes we bought 18 months ago. So it is still relatively new. We have about, as you see on this page, about 2.5 million or so in the portfolio. We just added a home last week. We're adding 3 or so in June, looking to add another 4 or so in July. So the goal is to be at 70 homes or so by the end of the year.
So you're buying the homes up front and then the buyers are buying them from you or
No,
partnering with you?
no, the buyers come in and they come to the website and they get pre-qualified.
Okay.
Which means they do their credit underwriting, they do the income underwriting. We give them a budget and we say, congratulations, you're qualified for, let's say, a $400,000 budget.
Gotcha.
And if they have an agent, they go out with that agent. If they don't have an agent, we partner them with agents in the network, right? Accredited agents. And you go out and shop for a home. And we have a buy box that says houses are eligible when they're single family on less than 2 acres, 250 to 750,000, right? Generally, the sweet spot is 300 to 400. So there's a buy box. We underwrite the home, and generally we accept about 50% or so of houses that come in through that funnel.
Mhm.
And then we purchase the home. So we don't have
Okay.
empty houses, right, waiting for customers. It's really the customer picks the house, and that's quite frankly one of the big benefits, right, for first-time buyers.
Right. When you said you're going to have 70 houses by the end of the year, that kind of threw me off. You're going to purchase. That's what kind of threw me off. I'm like, what? Are you buying them up front and then they purchase from them? So,
No.
I do have a question. I understood you to say that you're in Charlotte, and I guess you're in a few other states.
Well, yeah, we're
I
in
know-
Raleigh, Durham, and then Charlotte. We're launching in Nashville next, and then, quite frankly, we're looking at a number of markets to see where we go from there.
Mhm.
And really, the model requires both, obviously, first-time buyers, right, and the challenge that first-time buyers have, but also the ability to attract capital, which means we're looking at markets where there's an expectation of increasing home prices.
Yeah, I was going to say, well, not only that, but I'm in a Virginia market right outside of DC. And I know you said your sweet spot is like 23 and 400, but that won't do very much here.
Yeah, I mean, we've done houses in the 600s, right? But the generally the starter home that we're looking for is 3, 4, 500.
Yeah.
Where are you, Bonetta?
4 and 5. I'm in Northern Virginia, right outside of DC, 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Between 4, 5, not quite to 6 to be. I work with a lot of first-time home buyers myself. I'm a former school teacher, so I work with a lot of first-time home buyers, and they have been really priced out of the market, like you said, these last year and a half since the interest rate went up. My business has gone very, very, very low because again, my market, my focus has really been on first-time. So I was really excited when I saw what the topic was going to be this evening because I'm still trying to find an alternative to be able to offer to some possible clients that really would like to buy in the market, but like you said, they're priced out. So I heard you say a couple of things that was really intriguing. The fact that you can turn this into a cash offer because it's very competitive here.
Yeah.
Very competitive. So.
And is the pressure you're seeing, Bonetta, mostly on down payment or on monthly payment or both?
Really in this here, both, because here they have to come up with not only, the down payment, but closing costs if they're not military. And that could be $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000, and if you're working, hand to mouth, like a lot of people just barely eking by, that's very daunting. Even with, we have a VHDA state program, but there's certain requirements you can't make. I have a military family right now, and they don't have to put down payment, and they make $192,000 between the two of them, but they don't have money for down. They don't have money for closing costs. I was like, ouch.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the personas we found is the college graduate, right? And you have a lot of folks in the portfolio dual income, but they have student debt, right? And they're sitting on $60,000 worth of student debt, so they haven't been able to save.
Right.
The other one is the closing cost, or in North Carolina, there's due diligence, right? Which is basically this non-refundable earnest money that you're putting out there, which scares a lot of folks. And then you have this fear of, okay, what if something happens? I'm buying a house that maybe isn't pristine, right? Because that's what I can afford. And now I need to put in money to fix the HVAC or the roof or, what have you. And so that's where I think that hurdle has gotten a lot higher.
Hey, Frank, we have a question from Amanda Andrew, and she's up near York, PA. But I want to just kind of throw my 2 cents worth here. I'm pretty familiar with the Northern Virginia market. Grew up there, and my dad still lives there. My mom's not too far away. But even though that market has higher prices, it is one of the most stable markets in the entire country. In the last recession, that DC market kept chugging right along. I mean, there's just so much, demand there, and it's grown so much since I was a kid. What used to be farm countries now, I mean, well, Benetta can tell you, but I would, yeah, I mean, just suggesting maybe look in there because everything's relative. Even though the average starting price might be higher, I
Mhm.
think you're going to see the percentage of potential percentage gains are still going to be very attractive.
Yep.
I'd have to agree
Yeah,
with you on that. Yeah,
yeah.
there's great
So,
potential. We just gotta
yeah,
find a solution.
yeah. So how you doing, Amanda?
Good. So I had a question. You mentioned co-ownership. So you're going in with, your investor. What are the limitations on the person that's occupying the house and living there as co-owner? Are they able to go ahead with repairs? Do they have to ask permission for certain things? If they want to paint the walls, I mean, I know they're not renting, but they're co-owner. So what are the limitations that person now has because there's an investor on the other side?
Yeah. So one of the things that we spend a lot of time on is working through how exactly do we deal with renovations, remodel in this structure, right? And so a couple of things. The first one is that the investors are all silent investors in a fund. And then the fund invests in all the homes in a diversified manner. So there's never a scenario where you have an individual investor, let's say Gary saying, oh, I'm the investor in Frank's house, and therefore I want to know what Frank is doing in the house, right? And because that's not a good scenario for either party, right? So we don't want activist investors in the sense of someone who drives by, every weekend and makes sure the lawn is being taken care of. That's one. The second one is on this notion of renovating and remodeling. The way the structure works is that the customer buys bricks every month, and then eventually they buy the home at the future market value. Now, the way we calculate that value every month and at the end of the 5-year horizon is through AVMs, automated valuation models. Those AVMs, as you may know, do not take into account the fact that someone replaces the kitchen countertops and puts new granite in there, or maybe adds, builds out the attic, or paints and makes other improvements. And so whatever value someone adds to the home ultimately is theirs to keep because it doesn't get reflected in either the price of the bricks that they're buying or the purchase price of the home in 5 years. And so what we've contractually written into the agreement is that the customer has the ability to do any sort of renovations and remodels. In fact, we encourage it to the extent that it adds value to the home. However, we do require approval on anything above $5,000, and obviously anything that requires permits, right, to make sure we're not stuck with an unpermitted addition or change to the property. But generally speaking, that's one of the big value drivers of home ownership is the ability to do to the home what you want, right? Rather than having to ask your landlord. So we want to encourage that.
So with that application process, since you said there's not just one investor that, is dealing directly with you, do all the investors now have to, approve that I want to put $10,000 into my siding or things like that?
No, I mean, this is a blind pool fund. So investors invest in the Ownify Home Fund for a 15% target return, but they don't look at the individual homes or have any sort of decision rights on individual properties, right? That is all vested in Ownify as effectively the manager of the fund and the property manager of the portfolio of homes. I think, Pia, if you have a question, right?
Hi, I just want to take a moment to thank you for watching a recording of the Monday Night Live class. Hope you're getting a lot out of it. I'm sure you will. I wanted to let you know that, you can come to Monday Night Live whenever you want, but you can also participate more with the team. Why don't you set up a call with me, a one-on-one strategy call? I can go over everything with you, show you everything that we have to offer. For example, did you know that on our team, not only do you get your leads, We actually give you your own account on our lead gen system. So this puts you in control. You're not waiting on somebody to hand you leads. You get to pick the ones you want. Okay. Huge difference. We have 21 of our own proprietary marketing campaigns. They're all copyright protected. We're the only ones that can use them. Okay. The coaching is absolutely one-on-one. We got 3 coaches. We even have a 4th success coach that we have access to. Okay. One of left fewer than 100 in the world. Okay. One-on-one coaching. Right now the big problem is volume. We need more transactions. We need more inventory. I get it. Well, we know how to get it. Our team actually outproduces the national average by more than 2 to 1. So if you're struggling, don't do that anymore. If you're a solo agent, if you're a team, let's just talk. Smart entrepreneurs are always open to discussion. Learn what we have to offer, and then you can make an informed decision about staying where you are or moving on. You've got to decide, if you're not where you want to be, you've got to take action to get where you want to be. Let's see how we can help you do that. I look forward to talking to you. Click on the link, set up a call. And by the way, I'll see you on the next Monday Night Live.
Yes, I apologize if you already covered this. I jumped in a little late. And thank you, Amanda, for prompting my second question. My first question is, I'm in Massachusetts and you're working right now in Carolinas and then moving westward a little bit. How could an agent like myself from Massachusetts be able to participate or work with you in this program?
I mean, today, the easiest way to work with us is as an investor, right? That's open to anyone across the US. To the extent that you want to bring our program to your market, right? I think that we should have that conversation to specifically look at where you are, right? And what the demographics look like. We have a model that looks at each of the 300 or so markets across the US, and we have a thesis on them. And then we have done the research to say, are there any constraints to this model from a legal perspective, right? Bizarrely, and you all know this, ownership is not defined in the US, right? It is up to the state and actually the county to define what ownership means. And so as we've kind of taken ownership apart and then put it back together, that certainly works in the Carolinas, it works in most states. Massachusetts is always quirky. So we'd have to look at that, right? And say, can you do co-ownership? Can you have a silent investor, right? Can you fractionalize the title through this LLC structure that we've built? And since you're all, in real estate, you understand this. What we're doing legally is that we purchase a home, and the home is actually purchased by an LLC that is a single purpose LLC that is just there to hold title to the home. And that LLC issues 10,000 shares, 10,000 bricks. And so the customer becomes a member of the LLC. The investors are members of the LLC through the fund. And the fund sells membership interests over time to the member in the LLC. So the customer legally is a tenant of the LLC, but also a shareholder of that same LLC. And that exists. It exists in New York City in condos, right, where the customer technically is an owner of the condo association, but also an owner of the unit. And so we've restructured this equity ownership through this LLC structure. And if there's just a question on it, does that work in Massachusetts, and does the local county kind of see that the right way?
Yeah, possibly. I have to look into that.
Yeah.
And that was the second question that you may have already gone over. How does one become an investor? And that was where I was thanking Amanda for prompting me.
So if you want to become an investor, you come to the website, Ownify or ownifyfund.com. You can look through the private placement memorandum and the subscription agreement and the pitch and all that. Today, that's open to accredited investors. Long term, we want to open that up to anyone, so that individual home buyers can also bring to the table their community, right? Whether that's their church or their group of friends or their family, or folks who are not going to give them a gift, but who may invest $5,000 into a home, especially if there's the right legal structure with a return and passive income along the way.
And could you clarify a little bit on what is accredited investor in your perspective?
Thanks. Yeah, my perspective unfortunately isn't the relevant one. It's the SEC that has the perspective.
Yeah.
The SEC defines an accredited investor as someone who, as an individual, makes at least $200,000 a year, or as a couple, at least $300,000 a year, or has a net worth of at least $1 million, excluding their primary residence. And so that's by definition, none of the home buyers are accredited investors. They wouldn't need us otherwise, right? And so really what ends up happening is that I look at the investors in the fund, a lot of them are wealthier individuals, a lot of them in the community, right, who like this idea of, I'm funding home ownership in Raleigh, Durham, right, in the Triangle, that's where I live. I'm funding home ownership in Nashville, that's where I live, right? I like the idea of enabling people in my local community to be able to buy houses rather than having Wall Street come in and buy those same homes.
I have another
Yeah.
question, if I may.
Go ahead, Bonetta.
Yeah, so can you tell me again, maybe I missed this, how long they are buying, they're in partnership? Is it like 10 years, 20 years, 30 years?
It's a 5-year program, the way it is structured today. And the way this works is that they start with 2%, and the payment plan is structured such that they're buying roughly 13 bricks or 13 basis points of equity every month, which over 5 years gets you to 10%.
Okay.
And the reason it's, kind of aimed at 10% is that that's a strong down payment for a conventional conforming 30-year fixed mortgage, right? So the customer has the occupancy agreement or the lease agreement for 5 years. They have the equity share agreement where they're building the equity in the LLC. And then the third agreement that runs in parallel is actually a purchase option that allows them to buy the home from the LLC at any point at market value. Now, at any point means you could do it earlier than 5 years. The reality is that most of the customers need to build the down payment first, which is why we've structured it as a 5-year program. Now, the next question you're probably going to ask is, well, what if someone can't buy the home after 5 years?
Exactly. You're reading my mind. I love it.
And so the customer has a couple of options. One is to just renew for another 5 years, and you just keep your 10%, and maybe you over the next 5 years build to 20%. Or you say, I'm happy with 10%, I want to stay there, and I'm just going to keep renting the 90%. So effectively, at that point, the customer rents or pays rent on 90% of the value of the home, right? And one of the things that's interesting is actually, even during the first 5 years, the rent payment goes down as the equity ownership of the customer goes up. So one scenario is they just renew. The other scenario is they say, I need to move somewhere else. I don't want to live in this home anymore. In which case they can sell their equity back to Ownify. We will buy it back at future market value, but we're charging them a 2% relisting fee, which is kind of the equivalent of a realtor or brokerage commission that you would incur if you just sold the home on the open market.
So this is sort of kind of a fancy rent to own kind of.
That's one way to think about it, right?
I wouldn't sell it that way, but that's kind of what they're doing.
Yeah, and one of the key pieces of innovation that we really worked hard on is how do we build rent to own in a way where we're giving the customer true ownership along the way, right? Because the problem with rent to own models is you rent, and then you buy, right? And while you're renting, you haven't really built equity. You're not participating in the appreciation of the home. You don't have an incentive to take care of the home so that it appreciates. And that's what we've solved for with this equity ownership structure of owning shares in the LLC that holds title to the home.
Interesting.
Yeah. I think, guys, and by the way, this is the second fractional ownership solution that I've seen. And this is, I think this is, the first one was clearly just for investors. This one absolutely is pro owner. I mean, it solves a problem. It gives people hope. So think about you're a real estate agent now. You're out there in the marketplace, and how many buyers have said, I really want to buy. I just don't know if I could afford these payments. I don't know if I have the down payment, that kind of thing. Who's had that? I mean, I think we all have in the last year, right? So here's a solution involving fractional ownership. When they do get ownership, fractional ownership literally means they own legally, contractually, every other way a portion of the property. It's not timeshare. It's share of the home, brick and mortar home. It builds over time. And when they go to eventually in 5 years refinance for whatever they're going to do, they're in a solid position. Right? They've already got equity. Their best creditor is the program. you know. So Frank, I mean, I'm a huge fan of this. I was as soon as you told me about it. Um, but I'm sorry, Amanda, you had your hand raised first, and then Dutch after that. So yeah.
Yeah, so one question is, okay, so after the 5 years, now they need to purchase the home. What is the down payment percentage? And do you tell them what the estimated down payment percentage would be at the beginning of that 5 years, so they have that 5 years to say, okay, well, now I need to save 20%, or I need to save 5%. My future estimated value of the house might be 300,000. So now I have a goal in mind to get to that point. What happens at that 5 year mark? Do they know
Yeah.
how much they need to pay? And what is the percentage of that down payment that you're expecting?
So for the first 5 years, if you can see my screen, the website basically gives you a bunch of tools and calculators to say at various house prices, what's my down payment and what's my monthly payment. And the monthly payment includes the equity buy to get you to 10% equity. So that's already fully built into the agreement, right? The customer signs up for this monthly payment. They're making a single monthly payment that's fixed for 5 years, and they're automatically building the equity by buying these shares in the LLC. So then at the end of 5 years, the question is, let's say this home, right? You start at 400,000, and now you build over 5 years, you build 10% of the equity, and the home after 5 years is worth 500,000. So 10% of 500,000 is worth 50,000. That's what they have, right? That's effectively their down payment. They now need to qualify for a mortgage of 450,000, right? And so the home has appreciated along the way. They have participated in some of that appreciation, but not all of it, right? Because they didn't have a mortgage. So they still need to now qualify for a mortgage of, let's say 400,000 for simple math, right? With their down payment. And that payment, that future payment, obviously today we don't know what that is. It depends on mortgage rates. The assumption, and this is what most of our customers assume, is that mortgage rates will be lower than the high sixes, low sevens they are today. So they should be able to qualify for a mortgage in 5 years. And then, quite frankly, the other big assumption that we underwrite towards is that the customer's income should at least keep rising in line with home prices, right? So the affordability won't be an issue in 5 years. Really, what we're helping them build over those 5 years is the down payment, right? And that nest egg of $40,000 or $45,000.
And that payment that monthly payment includes taxes, right? Property taxes?
Yeah, it includes everything. So the occupancy itself, property taxes, insurance, repairs. And this is, quite frankly, for first-time buyers in particular, we've heard this a lot from younger folks in particular. I want a single monthly payment. I don't want to worry about what happens if the water heater breaks or the HVAC needs replacing, right? We take care of all of that, so they don't have to worry about, another bill coming due somewhere. I think Dutch, you were next on the questions.
Yes, sir. I was involved with an Indian bank that was going to put out leases because the land is in trust and you can't foreclose on the trust. So we had a document set up that acted as a lease, but also was the same value as a mortgage. One of the benefits of this was that no matter what they did, they would not get a negative credit report because they could just stop doing the lease and they weren't ever foreclosed on. do you see a way that this investment scenario that you have can brag about that and say, you know, no matter what happens, you're not going to be foreclosed on. We're not going to wreck your credit. We're not going to put you in the poorhouse, which is one of the things that happens a lot of times when folks get involved with the mortgage companies is they don't care and they'll wreck their credit if they can. Do you see a scenario where this could be part of the advertising or the advantages of doing a deal with your company?
Yeah, I could see that scenario. I would never advertise it. And the reason is that it creates this moral hazard, right? You don't want to advertise to people that we will not wreck your credit, because the only people who respond to that are the ones worried about someone wrecking their credit, right? And so you create this perverse scenario where you're attracting folks, you know, who may know more than you ever will about their likelihood of making the payment. Now, the reality is that so far, the credit characteristics of people in the program are really good. So, and you know, as I said, we've never had a late payment. So far, I'm not worried about the credit performance. What you're saying, though, Dutch, is correct, that if someone were to stop paying, right, the Onify payment obligation, the legal resolve is not a foreclosure, it's an eviction, which from a credit reporting perspective is less painful to the consumer, right? Now, it's still going to ding your credit report if you have an eviction and if you have a payment obligation, but nowhere near as negatively as a foreclosure would, right? So there is a little bit of a analogy there to what you were describing, which is defaulting on a lease obligation is less painful than defaulting on a mortgage obligation in the lens of a credit bureau, right? And the impact it has on your credit score.
Right. Okay. I understand. I just know that the folks I was dealing with had a very high moral standing in the respect that biblically they thought that some of the interest that was charged, especially in the first 10 years of a mortgage, it's really not 8%. It's more like 22, 23%, because majority of the payment goes to interest and not the principal. If it was simple interest, then you could say, hey, I've got a 7% loan or 8% loan. I'm paying simple interest over a period of 30 years. But the way compound interest works, it's basically usury in the Old Testament and going back, in other words, the morality of staying with loans that have only appeared in the last 75 to 80 years, and with the compound interest. Or I'm dating myself, really last 100, 125 years, because the usury and the forgiveness, the jubilee, all of the things that people who are living a high moral ground on what they do with their finances was of their concern, and especially dealing with land that was on trust property. So that's a good answer. I can accept that. That's good. Thank you. Very good answer.
I mean, it's interesting, right? It kind of goes back to Bonetta's point on the Islamic financing, right? And this notion that interest is perceived in certain cultures, whether you look at the Old Testament or other, you know, interest is perceived as morally not acceptable, right? And so,
right, exactly. I heard her question, and that perked my interest in, do you see that? Do you recognize it? Do you advertise it? Do you, yeah, and that's why I was asking the questions. No, I wouldn't advertise, we'll never wreck your credit, but there's a lot of people who would like to have an opportunity to buy a house that when they sign up, they know that they're not going to, well, like the Indians, if they lease the house from the chief says, you're not making your payments. Okay, move out. You're not making the lease anymore. And they put somebody else in the house, but they don't wreck their credit.
Right.
They just have to move because they didn't keep up their
Yeah.
So I think
obligation.
Karen, you had another question.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dad.
Yes, I did. A lot can happen in 5 years. So a scenario could be that you start with a family of 3 and it's doubled to a family of 6. So on year 4, a family comes and says, you know what, we have outgrown this house. So the 10% that's been applied toward these payments on that other house, can it be moved over and applied toward a different house, or are they married to that house?
That's an interesting scenario. So they can always sell their equity stake back to Ownify, right? And that's where we charge that 2% relisting fee. And so that is a little bit of a hit, but they could take the equity and move somewhere else. Now, in that scenario, if someone were to come to us and say, look, we've doubled our family, we love your program, we've been, diligent ownies, we want to get a bigger house, we would probably figure out, especially if they stayed in the program, right, how to buy a home for them, move the equity, and then take the home that they just left and put another Oni in there. The challenge is always, can you find, this is kind of the crux of the problem, right? There are some companies who buy 50, 100, 1,000 homes, right? And then they're marketing those and trying to find tenants and renters for those homes. And then you have the marketing problem, the lease up problem, the turnover problem, the vacancy problem, all of that, right? Whereas what we've done is we've said, come qualify, you get to pick a house. And once you're in the house, right, that's great. You should stay there. That's the whole idea. But of course, there's that scenario you're mentioning and a bunch of variations thereof, right?
Right.
So I think at the margin, we would probably try to find a workout where we keep the equity, move them into a new home, right? So if they've built up 8 or 10%, they can use that effectively as a down payment into the new home.
Right. And I could see a penalty being kind of a strike against you. So I just thought that I would ask the question, because, obviously you want people who are going to remain loyal to the program.
Yeah, well, the reason we put this relisting fee in place is that what we didn't want people to do is use this as short-term bridge financing.
Right.
Right. To say, I can't get a mortgage now, or for whatever reason, I just want this house for 6 months, right? So that's also why it melts away over time, which means someone who's in year 4 or 5, obviously we're going to have a better situation than someone who's in 6 months in.
Yeah. Plus, if you think about it, I mean, it was a great question, Karen. And that happens. I mean, when you were younger, just getting married and you're starting to have children, you're growing fast. And how many people bought their first house only to move out 5 years or less? I mean, I was one of them. In fact, I did it twice. And you pay a penalty in the open market too, because you got to relist it. And, haven't built up equity. So chances are you're going to take a bit of a hit on that because of the commissions and, the transfer taxes and all that. But, so I can see why why Ownify has to do that, because there are costs to them too. They've technically own the majority of the house still, but
I could see
case,
that might be something though that you might want to actually put in, to the language of your contracts, based upon, them staying in the program and moving up. If you don't have it there already.
We don't. It's something we had anticipated, but we don't have it in the language. So this is definitely something where, can you take your equity to another Ownify home, right? Or
right.
Yeah, and that's definitely.
And of course, within that period of time, I mean, Gary's right. Like, any of us would take a hit on our, on our equity, but, by the same token, it doesn't have to be a complete hit, right?
Yeah.
Hey, Frank. So we have agents on tonight. Most of them are on the team. We do have agents that are not on the team. They're from other brokerages, even investors on. But the main thing is we're all over the country. We've got agents on our team in 38 states. So if we have most of the big markets covered. So if we have agents in areas like, I know right now, obviously California people are leaving California. Their population is a negative. But Oregon and Washington State are growing. They're great places. Of course, you know about Texas going over to Florida and up the coast to North Carolina and in Tennessee. Those are all great. But agents on here, what's happening right now, and I'm sure you know this, is we have a lot of buyers out there. There's some of them are sitting tight because they're looking at the interest rates compared to what they were 2 years ago. They're looking at the prices. I think this is a extremely viable alternative. I mean, it allows them to plug in now at today's prices and start building equity, start, piling up the bricks, so to speak. Because I don't care what happens in the economy. We're probably gonna have a recession, but it doesn't mean that prices go down in real estate. It's actually rare for that to happen. If the last recession, yes, prices went down in most areas, but that's normally not the case. In fact, historically, if you look at real estate, just like the stock market, it over time always goes up. So my thing is this is I can't predict the future. I've been around, long enough to see 5 market cycles, and I can tell you over time, it is far, far better to buy. Just go ahead and buy. Don't worry about if it's up or down. People who say I'm going to wait and buy are actually ones making a mistake, right? And we have plenty of history that shows that. But the people that say I'm going to buy and wait always end up in. So these people can buy now, lock in, increase their equity through their payments, but more importantly, the appreciation of the properties. I mean, we still have a shortage of housing in this country. And I think new construction, just like every other recession, is going to be what pulls it out of it when it does happen, which means more houses coming to market. So, in any case, long story short is, um, if you knew where these agents were, or they could give you market dynamics, which they can, everybody on this team has access to the resources and tools that can get you absolute, spot on information, data on the different areas. Is that something you'd be interested in hearing from there's about 100 agents on the team in these 38 states,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think generally we're looking to figure out where we go next, right?
Mhm.
And one of the key drivers of our business is the local agent community, right? So we acquire our customers through the agent network. We have 155 accredited realtors in Raleigh-Durham, right? And there's 2 or 3 coming in every day. And so to the extent that you have customers in the market or investors in the market, or a combination of the two, or to the extent if you're passionate about this and say, hey, this is a good idea, I want to be involved, right? That's exactly who we're looking for to say, let's start this. We picked Nashville because we had a great local agent, right, who got us in touch with an early buyer, and we said, sure, Nashville was on the list anyway, this is just an opportunistic way to bump it to further up the top, right? So I think to the extent that, any of you on the call have a passion for this, or Gary, if there are other folks on your team, right, more broadly, then I'll put my email and contact info in the chat. Just please reach out, right? And then we'll look at it. And it doesn't mean that, hey, we're going to be in Northern Virginia, Bonetta, but we may be, right?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, we actually have on our team the best #1 agent in Nashville. She's not on the call tonight. Brianna Latham. Who here can vouch for Brianna Latham on the team here?
All right.
She's absolutely awesome. I mean, when you look at that person accomplishes, it's just a mind-boggling, And then how about Atlanta?
Atlanta's on the list, definitely. Yeah. I mean, obviously.
Okay. Kendra Dobbins, absolute rock star. Just had a call with her today, just phenomenal. And by the way, Bonetta's that same person up in Northern Virginia. I mean, everybody here, Karen's up in Pittsburgh. I mean, Pittsburgh's a very stable market. It has been for a generation now. And I'm not trying to pick people out and miss other people. Just I'm looking at. I have 1, 2, 3. I have six people pictures on my screen here, because of the share screen, so I can't see everybody else's on. But here we go. Look at that, Rob Perot down near Tampa, St. Pete. Nicole Mayer's up in Northern California. Chris Gonzalez is down in South Florida. He's a guest student on tonight. Craig Leverett. How about upstate South Carolina?
Upstate South Carolina, is that basically the southern tip of Charlotte?
No, that's so Charlotte's right on the line of North and South Carolina. It's in
Yeah,
North Carolina, and down below that, yeah, you got so Greenwood, I mean
okay.
Anderson, Clemson, Greenville. I mean, it's one of we call it a sleeper state because the cost basis of property is still like really, really favorable. Taxes are very low. And it's a sleeper state because other than us people here on this call, a lot of people don't think of it, but I'm telling you, it's attracting a lot of attention right now. People gobbling up land and major industries are moving there. Um, I mean, that's what I've got my eyes on there. But in any case, you got another Pennsylvanian, Christiane Charles, Illinois, Valerie Pasternak, Capex and San Antonio. Melinda's in Fredericksburg, Virginia. That's between Richmond and Northern Virginia. Craig Cannon is in near Denver, Colorado. Did I say Craig? I did. Chris, Rob, Mike McGran. Oh, here's a good one for you. College Station, Texas,
Mm-hmm.
an hour northwest of Houston. Anna Galumian's also in San Antonio and um, sorry, yeah, also in San Antonio. Excuse me. Vegas, Gilbert Evans. It's in Vegas. That's another good one.
You know,
Kim
I just noticed something. Can I bring something up, Gary? I just
No,
noticed, I
no,
just
just kidding. Go
noticed,
ahead.
I just noticed that Frank had put in there, if you have a potential buyer or want to learn more about investing. I mean, there's a lot of people on this call that are already investors or who've been investors for 20 years already. So, I
Yeah.
mean, it's not like we don't know how to invest. It's just a matter of like, what are you looking for? So, I just thought I'd bring that up. I don't know if that's part of what you're looking for to work with. Most of us work with only investors anyway.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
we're looking for both, right? And at the end of the day, what we've built with Ownify is a platform that plugs into first-time home buyers, right? They don't have to be first-time, but usually first-time buyers and investors on the other side, right? And it structures the agreement such that ownies can get into homes and investors can get good returns, right? So to the extent that
right.
we're working with investors who want passive income and appreciate the social impact and the mission that we're looking to solve here, right? The
Right.
problem we're looking to solve for, then of course, please send them my way and happy to jump on a call or do the more detailed overview. We need both, right? And ultimately, in order for this to scale, you need capital. And you need obviously the consumer side, and the consumer side is out there, right? It's the capital that is still that right now, if I look at our business, we're more constrained on the capital side than on the consumer side.
Mm-hmm.
But then we also have, last week we had $400,000 worth of capital come in, so the pendulum kind of swings, right? Depending on the week.
Well, if you're looking at accredited investors, then obviously you're advertising.
We are, yeah.
Right. So, I mean, because you wouldn't have to have accredited investors if you weren't doing advertising necessarily. So
yeah, this is a 506c fund, right? So it is accredited, but it is public. We are advertising publicly, and
yeah. How are you advertising? Are you doing it via like Facebook or internet?
Yeah, there's social media. So there's Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. We have a broker dealer. We're on a couple of different fund platforms, right? And then quite frankly, a lot of it is actually the local word of mouth, right? So we've had a lot of the early adopter realtors either invested or they told their BIC and someone who owns the brokerage, maybe the folks who had a little bit more money, they came in. And then about half the capital we've raised so far has come out of donor advised funds, or DAFs, which is, I don't know if you're familiar with those, are basically the tax kind of savings vehicles that a number of folks have out there. And so you can use that to invest because it's a social mission and an impact component, right? As well.
Yeah. So I just raised my hand, so I wanted to make the plea and make the point that Gary, in this situation, made a good unbeknownst, I'm going to say unbeknownst to him, made a good point for all of us to show our faces on camera, because he highlighted so many great agents that we are across the country, and having you, Frank, see what I look like. When you get my email, then you'll be like, "Oh yeah, Gary mentioned his name. I saw his face.
Yeah.
I feel more comfortable going forward with if to go on business with him, rather than like, well, we're going to start from stage 0."
Yes,
So
that is absolutely true. And thank you, Gary, for organizing this. Really appreciate it. And you're right.
Go PF.
Yeah, we're an education-based team, and in fact, that was part of my conversation with I wish Kendra was on, and I wish she was able to be here, because we talked about the success of the team, and it's you'll find out, Frank, from working with these folks, the team's really not about me. My name's not even on the team name. We don't take any credit for any sales or listings. It's all the agents. But the point is to help them be the heroes in their markets, help them build their brands and their models and their teams. So, by the way, speaking of markets, Dorothy Santana is right in your market, right in the Bay Area, San Francisco area. So she's an awesome person. In fact, she just got one under contract today. So, you know, another example of an interesting market. People sometimes will hear California and think, "My gosh, how can you afford it out there?" And I get it, but everything is relative. Remember,
Yep.
if the market's going up 10% in a neighborhood where the house was selling for 200,000, that means it went to 220. But if a neighborhood's going up 10% and the houses are a million, it means they go to 1.1 million. That's $100,000 gain. That's a lot of commission, so investing is the same way. When we flip houses in the Bay Area, we haven't done it for a while, but the gains were always so much greater. And the rentals, I mean, they just keep going up. I mean, Dorothy, you see it. The rentals out there keep going up and up and up. I mean, the values, the sale prices, because people want to lock into that, they get that equity as well as the cash flow. It's just amazing. So, in any case, I hope I didn't miss anybody here. I'm trying to go. Kurt Worsham, Salem, Oregon, right smack in the middle, on right towards the coast. Another great place of growth. Jackie's up in Fort Lee, New Jersey, right over the river from New York. Henry's in New York. Well, hey guys, if I've missed you, please know it's not on purpose. It's accidental. And please raise your hand, unmute yourself, and let Frank know where you are. I should have been writing down the names as I'm going through them. So, yeah. Okay. Oh, Quinzella. Tell Frank where you're from.
I am a Georgia realtor, and I'm currently in St. Croix, Virgin Island.
Nice. Enjoy it.
Yeah.
That's great.
Oh, and Angela too. I'm sorry. Angela's from like Atlanta and south of Atlanta too. Angela Fleming's here. Who else? Is anybody? Help me, guys. Is there anybody I missed that you can see that his name I didn't call?
Eric, but he's not even in his
Eric
box. He's not in his Hollywood square.
Yeah, he's in Connecticut. Yeah.
There he is. Hi, Eric. I choose Eric.
There you go. I thought I saw something from Janai, and now I don't see it. Janai, you're not. Janai, you're not a panelist. I'm not sure if you're able to. I think when you don't let yourself be panelist, you miss out on some of the. Janai, I'm going to try to promote you again because you may have had a question. Yeah. Hey guys, listen up. It's 12 after 8 Eastern. This has been very gracious of Frank to do this. Does anybody have any questions for Frank? You want to share your information with Frank? I would take advantage of the situation. There's Janai. Hi, Janai.
Hi, I just wanted to introduce myself and say I'm from northern Wisconsin.
There you go.
Hey.
Yep.
Thanks, Janai.
Beautiful northern Wisconsin. Amazingly beautiful. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I'll tell you what, if you guys will have any questions, if you do have questions, even if other than the subject, I'll stay on longer. but let's be respectful for Frank. And then, so Frank, I look forward to working with you, man. I love the program. I know some people had some tough questions, but the fact is the market isn't perfect and very few consumers are perfect. In fact, only 10% of consumers or what bankers considered an easy bet, an easy loan. 90% of borrowers have some hurdle to overcome. It's just a fact of life. But here's an alternative for you guys as agents to make more use of your license, earn more commissions by identifying the buyers that are really anxious. They want this, they want to be part of the American dream of homeownership, and they don't have to wait. To me, the wait and see approach is always the worst one. It's the most likely to end in failure and regret. Waiting, it's just in real estate, the best time to get in is now, So, okay, let's see here.
Cool. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate all the questions and the engagement. And yeah, as I mentioned, if you have buyers, if you have investors, or if you want to just learn more and see how we can bring this to your market, ping me, and look forward to working with you.
You got it. Oh, I do see what Grace Saliente. Grace, if you want to meet yourself, Grace, let Frank know where you're from. I just realized I didn't call her. Hi, Grace.
Hello, everybody. I'm from Southern California.
Excellent. Inland Empire.
Yes, Inland Empire.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Okay.
I hope
All right,
that I
guys.
wasn't too hard on you, Frank. I think Gary was referring to me as being hard on you. So anyway,
I've spent a year talking to the SEC. They are hard.
No,
you guys are great.
The SEC is like way harder than I would be. But anyway, yeah, it was nice. It was nice, hearing about your program.
All right. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Okay. Karen's actually a sweetheart. So she might call you out on something, but she'll be the first person to put her arm around your shoulder and drink a Canadian Molson with you, or a Crown Royal. She's a Canadian.
I don't drink beer.
Okay, well, all right. Well,
but I am Canadian.
There you go. All right.
Thanks.
All right, guys. You guys have a good night. We'll see you next Monday night. And then make sure you're on the team call next Wednesday. That's always the second Wednesday of the month, guys. Make sure you're on that. I got some important things to go over. And we'll see you then.
Thank you for watching this episode of Monday Night Live. Be sure to subscribe to our channel and go to realestatewithgarywilson.com to join our community and start building wealth today.